Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're having a fabulous day. I'm going to get you to just wave your hands for a second, because right down here, there's a fire door there that's leaking cold air right across here, so it's nice and chilly. So to start with, I'd like to say hi to Mike. Mike, he's a lead developer for Volatility, and he said, I'm going to have some people see you in your north. So if you'd like to wave your hands for me and say, hi Mike, I can take a picture and say, I did it. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Hi Mike. Hi. Thank you. Hope you're feeling a bit warmer now. Okay, so I'm going to do the bit about me, but mine's a bit shorter. That is my first computer. At the time, my salary was £54, so apologies for the quality of the image. I couldn't find my original advert that I bought it from. But yeah, my salary was £54, so it actually sat halfway between the kit built and the built version. So I bought the kit and I assembled it myself. Not surprisingly, when your salary is £54 a week, you have to balance it out. And I love the bit 16K RAM for massive add-on memory. How many web pages could you fit in that these days? Honestly. I'm not going to go through anything else about me, because everything you need to know is on LinkedIn. Don't bother looking for me on Facebook. I'm not there. Same with Twitter. Sorry. I'm an old school guy, as you probably guessed, for the grey hair. The one thing I will introduce you to is something that has developed over the years with all the teams that I'm working from, which is Alan's rules for investigation. Never overlook the bleeding obvious. Sorry, yes, I did that word slip out. I apologise. Nothing beats the Mark 1 human eyeball. You're always, the thing that we are built for is pattern recognition as a human species, and we make exceptional use of that. Also, never underestimate the stupidity of the individual. Trust me on this one. I've got a few examples that prove this. And everybody lies. Some people quite explicitly say. But, I've got so many stories, it's not funny. With the work that we do, we have to be able to explain to pretty much all and sundry what it is that we found, what it means, and what they have to do to fix it. So my basic ruling for the team is, if you can't explain it, then you don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, go back and dig again. The measure twice, cut once is actually from my days in school at woodworking. No, I did not have computers in my school when I grew up. I am that old. I'm sorry. My own team calls me Grandad, which is sadly technically possible for some of them, although not true, I hasten to add. What we do is important, and we have to be able to give feedback and give results to clients. So we note everything. The converse of that is when you're dealing with executives, and I've been bitten more than once by this, is say very little and mean everything. Because like dealing with lawyers and journalists, they will take things out of context and throw them back at you ad infinitum. And the last one by no means least, the Sherlock Holmes principle, which is, I have to thank Arthur Conan Doyle for that one. Eliminate the impossible, whatever left, however improbable, must be the answer. So, let's start with the definition. What is an APT? APT, I hate the phrase. APT is quite stupid, but it's become synonymous. So whenever you're dealing with people who are not technically savvy, they've invariably heard of APT, especially in the security industry. You'd be amazed how many people I deal with in the security industry who have absolutely no idea about the technology that they're responsible for. So my job is to translate a lot of the stuff. The thing about the APT is they are invariably business or political motives. We have seen a change, I've noticed a change in behaviour in threat actors in the criminal fraternity that are now using tools and techniques that were formerly associated with advanced threat groups. So the advanced, sophisticated techniques, not so much really. And the persistence bit, I haven't bothered to highlight the persistence because let's face it, if you've got a piece of malware, the whole point of having a piece of malware on the system is it stays there. So it wants to persist. So my definition of every piece of malware wants to persist. So what makes this any different? In my humble opinion, absolutely nothing at all. What really makes the difference is if we use a pyramid to try and describe the different groups that we encounter. Correction, what I encounter. You're all bad people as far as I'm concerned, so get over it. We have this, I nicked this from the firm as one of the standard slides that we use. I use it in the training course that I do as well. The likelihood of attack versus the sophistication. Now, we invariably live at the top end of the two, so a lot of my cases are dealing with the upper end of the scale. Nation state or criminals. The difference between the two is actually quite simple. Nation state wants something. Invariably it's information of some shape or form to forward either a political or, surprisingly enough, a commercial interest. But I'll get on to more of that a little bit later. Criminals, pretty obvious, they're in for the money. Why be a criminal if you're not going to make money out of it? Seems a pretty dumb way to do it. Unless you are, of course, a script kiddie or a hacktivist. Oh, excuse me. Script kiddie is a bit of an old term. It's not really true. It's more of a question of a generic definition for people who are trying to do things, trying to figure things out. But as with most things, I mean, you've probably heard in the news about the recent work the police have done on county line drug trafficking. They're using kids for this stuff because when the kids get arrested, there's nothing that happens to them. The same is true here. They're expendable commodity. So, you're doing your hacking in your bedroom and you're 12, 13 these days, or whatever the kids do, I don't know, I'm too old. And they suddenly find they can make a few quid here and there by just DOSing a particular site or doing whatever it happens to be. That's fair enough. They're going to take it. They're going to take the kit. They're going to take the money. They don't really understand the impact that they're having or the part in a bigger game that they're playing. So that's a bit about the background of what it is that we go through. I suppose our adversaries in one of the description. The title slide, the IR DevSecOps, I'm sorry I made that up. It really is just flying by the seat of your pants. And that'll become a bit clearer soon. I didn't actually realise that DevSecOps is actually a thing. So I kind of made it up. I must have heard it somewhere and not realised it. But there is a principle of a kind of IR operations, the kind of things that we do. So I go into a client first, there's always things that they ask. How did it happen? When did it happen? What do I tell the Information Commissioner's Office when I have to phone them to say we've had a breach? That third one is a fairly recent addition. But whether it's the Information Commissioner's Office, the board of the company, or whoever, they've got to, everybody reports to somebody, especially within organizations, and they increasingly want something that they can give plausible deniability. For law enforcement forensics, it's known as the Trojan defense. So it wasn't me, Guff, it was a hacker. What did it? Oh, really? No, I didn't put those there. No. So in going through these, trying to answer these basic questions that all clients have, no matter what the case or whatever the structure, we have to break things down because it's impossible to do larger scale investigations with one person. It's just not, you're dealing with 40,000 endpoint investigations. It's just not fun. So you've got to work out and pick your targets. Now, I've highlighted foundation entry in patient 0 because that's what I'm going to focus on for the few examples that I've got for you. The find all infected hosts, I'm going to ask you to think about what is it fairly safe to say that you're all hackers in some shape or form? Reasonable? Yeah, fair. We're at hacking conference, I would expect that. If not, you're in the wrong place. There's the door. No, I'm only kidding. So, from your point of view, you only need to succeed once. You get into a state, you establish a foothold, and you do what you need to do. I'm coming at it from the other side of the fence. So, I'm looking at a client's estate and saying, okay, we know somebody's got into we have an event that triggers the investigation. We know somebody's in the estate. Where the hell are we? Where are they? How did they get there? Which is where those questions come from. How did they get in? Well, not only how did they get in, first of all, you've got to find where they are within the estate. So you've got to break it down and develop streams of investigation. And this is the way that I work. This is the way that my team works, essentially, is we start looking at the case and things fall out as you look at a case. Well, right, how did they get in? Well, we've got to find out where they are in the estate, and we've got to find out how they get in. You then break that down even further, and you start looking at the network data. You look at data from individual hosts, you look at log data, but first thing is you've got to grab as much evidence as you can in order to start building a picture. Obviously, if you've got an estate with 40,000 endpoints, you can't walk around plugging a USB into each endpoint. I have actually had clients actually have to do them. I've had clients running around an office in Kuala Lumpur trying to find a machine that we saw on the network that wasn't supposed to exist. I've had clients, when you take an IP address and machine name to them, saying, you've seen this machine behaving badly. Oh, that's odd. Why is that odd? Well, it's actually in a building that we sold off about 3 years ago, and that was supposed to be decommissioned. Well, it's still online on the network now. Look, you might want to go and have a look at that one. So we use, wherever possible, some EDR tooling. The one thing I've learned about the computing industry in general is 3-letter acronyms, TLAs. Keep emerging. It doesn't matter what technology it is. I started on mainframes. So TLAs are a bane of my existence. However, EDR is what it is called now, and we have our own. That's its logo. We built it. It comes from the days when we were MWR. It was somebody's bright idea, thinking, I can do detection better than anything that's out there. So we did. And it grew and grew and grew, and eventually became Countercept. So we have a Countercept agent that we drop on. We encourage clients to adopt, at least during the time of the investigation. It means I can cast the net out really wide and look for specific artifacts across a huge number of machines. Absolutely enormous number of machines. Staggeringly enormous numbers of machines. That's the sales pitch over. What I invariably get is what has become known in your parlance as living off the land. I've been doing it for decades. And I can say decades because I am that old. I'm going to keep saying that because if you haven't noticed, my hair is grey. And it got grey for a reason. So this is a very simple case. It's called the project name we call it, because we give our project, our cases code names, so we don't reveal the client name. This was Valkyrie. It's a few years old now, but it's a quite salutary case. And if you ever go to our office in London, there is actually one of our meeting rooms called Valkyrie. So we have the problem. There's an infection within the estate. There's a compromise. This was a 40,000 seat deployment. It would have been if we had one, but we didn't, so we had to make stuff up as we went along, hence the flying by the seat of your pants. So you make use of what is available. So we have a desktop management solution. So what we did was we used the desktop management solution to send a job, in this case a one-line batch file, to every machine on the entire network. So that's the outbound leg. That's great. So we're running this batch file, this one-line batch file. I'll come on to what that looks like on the next slide. To determine whether that machine is infected, because after we studied the piece of malware, we realized that it used the services key, but it created a randomly generated service name that looked perfect. It had a list of about 25 service names that we had. But one thing that was common with all of those service names is that they had a security subkey with data values in there. So I managed to create a batch file, a one-line batch file, one line, yes, that we sent out to all these. And if it found that registry key, it would create a file on the file system. We then hard-coded into the managed AV solution a customer rule alert for when that file was created. That way, we could find out which machines were actually infected or had trace of infection, which took the 40,000 endpoints down to 120. Still a lot, but a lot more manageable. All we're doing is that funnel indicator. We're taking all the pile of smelly brown stuff and we're filtering it down to something more usable. Wasn't exactly happy, but it was somewhere to go. So, what does it look like? I ran this the other night. So, you can see I ran the one-line batch file against my machine and it didn't find anything. So, I put those registry keys in, which fake out the pattern that we were looking for. In case you're wondering, the batch file was called find evil. And when the registry key is found, in this case, it just echoes out. We found the keys for Alan's really bad malware. Really quite simple. It uses a registry query with the find option to find all data, because I said it uses a data key, so I go looking for all of those. Anything that begins with the word data, I can do that in the registry query. Then I take all those results and I pipe them into a find string, or grep for your parlance, to look for the word security. Because only when that and that are true does it exist. That's living off the land in my world. Slime birds using that, yeah. And it was 40,000 endpoints and about 1,200 servers, I think it was. I forget now. So long ago, so many cases ago. But let's have a look at a couple of cases to give you a little bit more of a background. This was quite a fun case. A UK client based predominantly out of London, but we had a number of international offices. Around 700 machines, so not massive in grand scheme of things of the cases that we're used to dealing with. But as with most things, it starts with a telephone call. Call goes something like this, and this is what most of my first conversations with clients go like. We have a problem. Okay. What kind of problem do you think you've got? Well, one of our administrators was logged onto his machine whilst he was on holiday. Are you really sure? Sure wasn't somebody borrowing his credentials or something? No, it was actually up a mountain in Thailand. It really was as well. That was the same thing. okay, let me get some kit together and we'll be with you. But we're there in about, because it was central London, it was really easy to get to. Hopped on the tube, we were there about half an hour later. The Locality Team had done a really interesting job. They found a piece of malware. Yeah, great. WebMCS RSS to exe. And a scheduled task that ran every time. But they were really, really helpful in that they'd gone around wherever they found it and they deleted it. Yeah, I'm loving this job already. It's not unusual for well-meaning staff to actually delete evidence as they go. It's not because they're evil. It's not even because they're stupid. They're just trying to do the best they can with the knowledge that they have, which is invariably the first time they've ever seen anything like this. But bear in mind, the first time I see most of the clients that I deal with, it's the worst day in their professional lives. Ever. It's not unusual for half the clients I deal with, or the people that I deal with at the various clients, to end up losing their job after I finish the case. Now, you could argue the fact that I'm the reason they lose their job. Not the way that I see it. Right? No. Sorry, you're in the wrong job in the first place. You don't know what you're doing. And if you try and hide things from your management team or anybody in that factor, you deserve a good kicking. I'm sorry. I make no judgments about. I just deal with the facts. That's what makes it easier. If I tell it as it is, and I'm sorry if that's uncomfortable for you as a client or you as an IT person, get it fixed. Simple as that. So, getting back to the business at hand, we have this piece of malware. We eventually managed to recover it from the recycle bin on one of the administrator account's desktop machines, which is great because it means we could have a bit of a look at it and figure out what it was doing. Other than that, you've got to start somewhere, so we just pick one of the infected machines. I did that, and it was great. We found that one of the domain administrators, and you might guess that I have changed the names to protect the guilty throughout this. You'll see why shortly, but day 0 is not a 0 day, I'm afraid. You could argue it was because the malware was compiled on the day that it was used. So it's just an evasion technique. So this is the day 0 was the day of the infection for the first host we looked at. That then gives us a number of key points. So now we've got the piece of malware, we know what kind of infection it is, we get an AV analysis done, we learn more about the malware, we find out how we can do the scan across the estate. We then get a copy of the malware to the AV vendor, so that the AV vendor can then start building custom rules, and so on and so forth. Like I said, you've got to have multiple streams, but let's focus on finding patient 0. How did this one get to this machine? Using a domain administrator and install the malware. So after a little bit of pain and anguish, says it in the wrong button, we go backwards to the second host on the machine. So that's quite interesting. We've got the same domain administrator accounts, and we have an RDP connection from one of the virtual servers, virtual server 5, to virtual server 1. And during that time, that domain administrator account runs the piece of malware. He also ran the same piece of malware on the same day, about 30 minutes earlier. Give or take. I say same piece of malware, it's recompiled again. So we've got our EDR2 link, and we've got one of the investigation streams looking at all of the hosts across the estate. We're going through the infection chain to figure out how the hell they got in. It's at this point I cut a very long story short-ish, I said ish, okay? And this isn't all of it yet. There's a bit more to come. So we followed the use of the domain administrator account and the use of the malware backwards through the estate. And each one of these is a fresh compile, with the exception of this one on day -8. So that's 8 days before this machine was infected, 8 days earlier. You will also notice, if you're paying attention, is that we went from virtual servers to a physical file server, to a domain controller, to a domain controller, to a different domain controller in a different domain with a different administrator. What does that tell you? Come on. I want to make sure you're awake. Go on.
They're sucking up credentials along with this attack.
Yes, and?
They're changing the hash value of the malware each time they recompile it, probably with some sort of authentication code.
Yeah. What does it tell you about the estate then? Huh?
You get the malware, so it's flat. Yeah.
Bang on! Full domain trust in play. Woohoo! Damn. So we've gone from domain. There was a full trust in place and there was a flat network. So there was nothing stopping it from this happening. And what these are RDP chain going through the estate. This is about 3-4 weeks work to walk back through this. We walk back through, we get back to a virtual web app server. And then things start to get a bit interesting. So what we find out is that the virtual web app server doesn't appear to have anything that would indicate an RDP session going through to DevDC2. But it did. Sherlock Holmes principle. Eliminate the impossible. So if it didn't RDP through there, somebody did. And then you find out that for some obscure reason, these are all Windows servers, as you might probably guess. This is running Apache. Who runs Apache on Windows? Why? Survey. So we then start digging into the Apache. And we find it's running Atlassian Bamboo, which has two remote code vulnerability execution, which our friendly attackers have actually used. This is a snippet from one of the log entries. And you'll notice that there's a tunnel.jsp with an onward connection on port 3389. So I now know that the threat actor is coming through the internet, through the web app server, onto the web app, because he did RDP onto itself, just for the hell of it, as well as tunneling straight through into the internal network. Lovely. So how do I process this gold mine of Apache log data? Well, you can do it in pretty much any way you see fit. And one of the things I do with my team is that there's no wrong answer so long as you get the results. I don't care how you do it. You know, if you want to use Unix, you want to use Windows, you want to use a Cray supercomputer, if you can afford one, then have at it. I don't care. So long as you can prove the results. My favorite tool for such things is about 15 years old. Log Parser. It's also smaller than most web pages, still. But it is really handy when you're presented with logs that look like that. Now, yes, I have obfuscated the date, and I've obfuscated the IP address. And if you hadn't noticed I'd obfuscated the IP address, I'd be very, very shocked. Investigations, incident response, and forensics in general. The one thing that I find mind-numbingly annoying is date format. It can also kill your investigation in terms of the amount of hours you usually try to fix this thing. It is not fun when you're presented with dates in logs in this format. Or what is usual is an American format. So you have month, day, year. Or in a lot of Apache logs, which was true in this case, you have day, then month, then nothing. You also have, this is actually the top of the log file. So you've got no idea what fields these are as well. It's not just Apache though, pretty much anything. Log creation is an afterthought by developers at the best of times. So we have, well, I say we. I'm not exactly a benevolent dictator when it comes to this. I'm just a plain old dictator. We're using ISO 8604, which is the RFC 339, I think it is, date format. So you've got a structured way to represent dates. Also, the team is distributed around the world. We've got guys in the US, we've got guys in Finland, not surprisingly, we've got guys in South Africa and Singapore. The one thing that is common to all of those is they all have different dates and times. So whenever they're working a case, they're working it in UTC. And if they don't, I will find them and give them a slap. Because trying to synchronize events across all different log sources from all different artifact sources, when you've got everything in different time zones, becomes an absolute mare. But it's the only way you can build up a picture. You have to take data from different sources and tie them all together to give a picture. Remember Alan's rules? If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. Well, at the end of the day, I've got to explain to a client how they got so completely owned. And this one has an interesting trick in it. So, this is what I did with this log file using Log Parser. Now, bear in mind, Log Parser is smaller than most web pages. It will actually fit on a floppy disk. For those of you that know, you don't remember it, do you? No, I'll stop that. Anyway, Log Parser allows me to break up the lines. Now, you can do the same thing with the Elk stack. You can do the same thing with grep, even with Excel, which is one of the, what I tend to do is use Log Parser to narrow down the log data to small enough it can fit into an Excel spreadsheet. Then it makes filtering that much more quicker. That much more quicker? My English is not very good. As you can tell, English is my second language. My first language is complete rubbish. Anyway, this is how I started to break down. And using a little bit of experience and tricks, I managed to get this to give me some more reasonable examples. Now, I'm going to probably kill myself now while I try and give you a little bit of a demo. Right, so if I have this right. Yeah, because I hate typing when I can't see the screen. I've actually got a little, in the Windows debugging tools, there's a remote tool that allows you to basically duplicate a command prompt or any program over the network. Now, this is just on my local host, so I can type in here and you can see that. For those of you who looked me up on LinkedIn already, you'll notice that I worked for Microsoft for 14 years. Hence why I'm using Windows. Sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. That's just the way I am. That's the way it is. You know, when you work for Microsoft for 14 years, you get used to using something. You've probably used Linux longer than I've been alive. Well, no, I've been using Windows longer than you've been alive. It's Friday, give me a break. Okay, so this is some of the logs that we have for this case. Now, not surprisingly, I have saved myself some pain and anguish by preserving some of the commands that I used, because I'm not a total masochist. Right, that's just taking the first log file. Now it's really quite simple, because all I've done is, if you ignore the parameters, the text line just says I'm dealing with a text file. Then we get into what is essentially SQL-like statements. So extract token means give me the first word on that line that is delimited by a space, which in the case of this log file is the IP address, and return it as an IP. And because it's SQL, I can say distinct. So give me the unique IP addresses for this log file. Now do it for all the log files. All right, that took 7 seconds. It actually, if I just have it output, I'm just going to output to CSV files. 0.08 seconds. For a 15-year-old application that is 32-bit only. If anybody wants a research project, please write me this in 64-bit code and handle JSON and everything that's come out in the last 15 years, so I don't have to do some creative jiggery-pokery to get it all working. So that's just an idea of one of the things that I tend to use for stuff like this. Getting back to the problem at hand, remember I said about, the advanced persistent threat is advanced? Nah, I just took it from GitHub. It was literally the code that was on GitHub for the JS proxy. In fact, most of the malware we found on the web server for the Atlassian breach was direct from GitHub. You gotta look, isn't it? Look, why waste a 0 day on something that you don't need to use it for? 0 days are not, they are things that occur very rarely. And even if they didn't, I wouldn't be able to tell you about them. So they used the breach in the Atlassian. They reset the password of the default account on the box. So they launched into the same concept, set the password for the default account, and then started running through the place like wildfire. They also ran Mimikatz to extract the credentials. And the full trust between the dev and the corp allowed them to walk straight across the estate, completely unhindered. There are a number of funny things about this that I can't tell you, which is a shame. So let's get back to the full picture. So 9 days before we have our detection, the attack on the Atlassian server begins, and they start tunneling about an hour after the first probe on the server. So they then start tunneling in after about an hour. They then go on through all the servers until eventually they find this called file server, which was their particular interest, because on that server they installed WinRAR. We recovered part 16 of a HR RAR file. Each one was 700 megabytes. We couldn't recover all of the files because it was just completely gone. It's a file server, the fragmentation had just destroyed all the evidence. And then what was called Flash XP was actually a secure FTP client software that they downloaded and installed. It's not the funniest one. The funniest one that we've had is where the attackers actually installed VirtualBox onto the client's server and then ran Kali inside the VirtualBox to attack the estate. That is true. That is actually true. I didn't believe it myself until I saw it. If you want to think about it in terms of the cyber kill chain, the cyber kill chain, you've got, when you see the cyber kill chain, you see it nice, evenly spaced, whatever particular branding you choose to use for it. But really, we've got recon delivery, exploit, C2 install, and then eternal recon, all within the same day. You've then got a huge chunk of lateral movement with additional C2 activity going on throughout that until you get the action on target. Now, I have a slide that I use when I'm talking to corporates, which shows through the cyber kill chain like this. And when you're dealing with corporates, the one thing that they always understand is money. It's life, that's the way it goes. So the conversation goes something along these lines. If you manage to take this and think of it as the point at which you're stopping the threat actor or the attacker or whatever you choose to call them, you take that line and you move it that way so you detect them sooner, it gets cheaper. They understand that, which is great. So in this case, the obvious thing was patching Atlassian server that had vulnerabilities that were known and were patched about 4 years earlier, something like that. Network segmentation, so you couldn't get from the dev environment to the corporate environment in one fell swoop. Trust relationships. Not having them in this case would have been a good thing, or at least making sure they weren't transitive. Multi-factor authentication, at least for the domain admins. I mean, for God's sake, you're giving these guys the keys to your entire business. At least make them work for it. Logging and responding to alerts. The reason that's important is because the AV actually did fire. But nobody spotted it. Which is really, really sad. Day -2. The fact that you've got alerts being cleaned up on your domain controller and you didn't think to look into that? Seriously? Go on.
So, I'm seeing, did you change the times of all of this?
Nope.
Okay, so what really blows my mind is shit like that should not be happening at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning at all. So again, that's a red flag right there.
Mm.
Crazy.
Yeah, and if I go back to this, you pointed out the time is 2 o'clock in the morning. What we learned significantly after the event is that this company was in those negotiations for opening a joint venture in China. Just saying.
Yeah. No attribution at all.
Heaven forbid. But they have no real intellectual property. They're a media company. They don't. They just make stuff up. Sorry, that was my outside voicing, wasn't it? So we couldn't understand why they took all of the HR folder from the file server. And that was why, because what we believe happened was they were trying to find out as much information as they could about the people conducting the negotiations. Allegedly. I'm going to give you a quick run through one of my more recent cases, but I'm going to go through it the other way around. So that's the first time we went from me walking in the door to me going, here's my report, thanks, bye. This unfortunate fellow, name has been changed to protect the guilty, was the unfortunate target for a phishing attack. They have systems in place, so they have a Cisco IM port. It blocked 4 phishing emails over a 5-day window. So it blocked 3 of them. 1 of them got through. And what I said about you have to only have to succeed once. Same is true for them. And unfortunately, that's what you would have looked like in the UI, because I nipped that out for the report, obviously changing details to protect individuals. And it walked straight through the Cisco IM port. Antivirus negative. Well, of course it didn't. It was only built that day. How do I know it was his fault? Word kept a list of open files. So I was able to prove that he'd opened the files from the registry hive. To be fair, he did tell his local IT person that he'd found something suspicious. Nothing happened, which is a shame. We then get the double strike. From his event log, we found a redacted PowerShell blog, which gives a load of juicy IP addresses or domain names. This was ended up being a 6-month investigation because the client had a unique capability for destroying evidence. Spectacularly brilliant. Because they decided when I arrived that their priority was business recovery. Not unreasonable. You have to make that call. Do you collect evidence or you do recover the business? You have to draw the balance between the two. And the client decided that no, we just want to know how they got in. We don't care about everything else. But complications ensued. So what turned out was the phishing attack led to Emotet on his host. Emotet led to Clackbot, which led to TrickBot. How do I know this? I'm going to say that for a minute. No, actually I'm not. It's because his host's AV log actually recorded 48 hits for both Clackbot and TrickBot. So the threat actors just kept, once they got Emotet running, they just kept throwing bits of malware until one worked. And nobody spotted it. From the TrickBot, we then get the first stage of lateral movement using TrickBot across the estate, communicating with C2 servers at the time. They then dropped PowerShell Empire, and we're using that across key assets within the estate with stolen credentials. Again, one of the things that was kind of interesting was one of the domain administrators was asked, were you doing this at 2 o'clock in the morning? No. So maybe you should have looked at that more. Because what they then used was PS exec to launch Ryuk across the estate and brick 700 machines. It's quite clever. What they did was they got into a file server, they created a file share on the file server, and then used PS exec with 700 computer names that they pulled from AD. PS exec running under domain admin context spins down to each one of these 700 machines and tells the machines in PS exec, go and pull the malware from the file server, which it dutifully does. They then run a second batch file that says, run that malware. which it dutifully does. So that's a bit of an introduction into my life, on my lack of sleep in some of these cases, and spending some really strange and interesting times. That's a bit of an internal joke with that recent case, which is, we know as Green Lantern, is just where I spent most of my life. The case itself, I heard from one of our account directors that the result of the infection and the drop of Ryoc cost them $250 million. Because what I haven't mentioned is that the place was an industrial plant, so they actually made things, and most of the computers were control units for huge robots. We're talking container-sized robots in a plant that covered several large, and put it this way, I was in building 6. And my first day on the case was actually walking around the estate through all of these buildings with robots. And the reason I could do that is because all the robots would stopped and they'd laid off 1,200 people for 2 weeks. Some of the machines actually had to go back to the vendors for the robotics to be rebuilt. There was every version of Windows from Windows 95 to Windows Server 2016, because the versions of Windows were tied to the robotics, and they couldn't update them or change them because that would invalidate the warranty with the robotics vendor. So, voila, here we are. There's the questions. It's the end of the day. I'm done. Got a few minutes left. I'm happy to take any questions on anything, but the meaning of life, everybody knows the answer is 42, and I will not be swayed from anything different.
I mean, obviously there's a level of professionalism you have to exercise. But have you ever been?
Surely not.
Have you ever been in a position of actually taking the IT manager or the IT director and saying, "Listen, there's some basic stuff that you guys completely missed."
Most cases.
How does that resonate to them? Are they sheepish? Are they arrogant? Our antivirus should have defended us, so we're calling our antivirus, manufacturer? Like, what is the reactions that you're getting?
The kind of two reactions is there's the denial. We bought the nice flashy blue box that should have protected everything, to the, oh my God, I don't really understand anything. What can we do? So, and all points in between. Yeah, I've been shouted at, I've been threatened with being sued, all sorts of things. People are very wide in their responses.
So I'm curious, you mentioned towards the start that you more asked your role like company chat over there on engagement.
Yeah.
And examples of why in most like environments that you respond to and the lack of basic security skills you find it common, or I think to not even get a legal to do anything like that, or
yeah.
In those cases?
Often as not. We are largely tool agnostic, so we use what we find. If you don't have anything, obviously I'm going to offer countersect because that's ours and we know how it works, so we can use it quick. If you've got something in place by Carbon Black or whatever, then we use that. If you've got an SIEM in place, we'll use that. All I'm looking for data. I don't care how I get it. Anyone?
Okay, we've got a few people waiting to get back in, so
yeah.
No other questions.
Yeah, go for it. Thank you very much. Have an excellent day, and I will be around probably on the Obscure stand if you have any further questions.